Commander Kyung-min gripped the metal railing of his command bridge as the massive Imperial warship Dominion's Edge slowly approached the small blue planet. His face, marked with battle scars from a dozen conquered worlds, showed no emotion as he stared at Earth through the viewing screen. To him, this was just another routine mission, another primitive world that would bow down to the mighty Galactic Empire within hours. The bridge buzzed with quiet activity. Dozens of alien officers worked at their stations, checking weapons systems and preparing for what they expected to be a quick victory. Kyung-min had done this same dance on over 30 planets. The pattern never changed. Show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, watch the locals panic and give up everything they had. Hai-Wan, he called to his communications officer, a tall woman with blue skin who had served under him for 5 years. Send them our standard message. Make it clear what happens to planets that refuse to cooperate. Hai-Wan's long fingers moved across her control panel like a musician playing an instrument. She had sent this same threatening message to countless worlds. The words were always the same, cold and final. Submit to Imperial rule immediately or face complete destruction. No negotiations. No second chances. The message shot through space at light speed, carrying the Empire's ultimatum to the people of Earth. Kyung-min expected the usual response, either terrified acceptance or desperate pleas for mercy. What he didn't expect was silence. Long, uncomfortable silence that stretched for several minutes. Then Earth's reply came through the speakers, calm and steady, like someone reading the weather report. This is Earth Defense Command. We have received your message. Passage denied. Turn back now and leave our solar system immediately. The bridge fell completely quiet. Even the soft humming of the ship's engines seemed to stop. Officers looked at each other with confusion and disbelief. In all their years of conquest, no one had ever responded to an Imperial ultimatum with such casual dismissal. Young-ho, Kyung-min's second-in-command, broke the silence with harsh laughter that echoed through the bridge. Did they just tell us to leave? A single planet with no space fleet thinks it can order around the Imperial Navy. He turned to his commander with excitement in his eyes. Sir, should I charge the main weapons? We can turn half their planet into glass within the hour. But Kyung-min raised his hand, signaling for patience. Something about this situation felt different, wrong. His instincts, sharpened by decades of military service, were screaming warnings at him. He had survived this long by listening to those warnings. He studied the scanner displays showing Earth's defensive capabilities. The readings were strange, inconsistent. Some systems appeared primitive, barely beyond chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. But other readings showed energy signatures that made no sense, technology that seemed impossible for such a young civilization. No, Kyung-min said slowly, his eyes never leaving the scanner data. We wait. Something is not right about this world. Captain Bo-Ram stepped through the shimmering teleportation beam onto Earth's orbital defense station, her boots clicking. Against the polished metal floor, a small device on her uniform glowed with soft blue light, marking her as a diplomatic envoy under galactic law. She had used this same immunity beacon on hundreds of worlds, always with the same result: terrified local leaders eager to avoid their planet's destruction. The space station around her was surprisingly advanced for such a primitive world. Clean corridors, sophisticated lighting systems, and technology that seemed far more developed than Earth's supposed level of civilization. Bo-Ram pushed these observations aside. Her job was simple: negotiate Earth's surrender terms and move on to the next conquest. The meeting room was stark and functional, with a simple metal table in the center. General Tai-Jin sat waiting for her, his gray hair and lined face showing the wear of many years in military service. His hands rested calmly on the table, fingers interlocked, as if he was discussing the weather rather than his planet's fate. Bo-Ram had expected to find panic in his eyes, desperation in his voice. Instead, she found something far more unsettling: complete calm. This human showed no fear of the massive Imperial fleet hanging just outside his solar system. General, Bo-Ram began, activating her recording device, I'm here to discuss your planet's integration into the Galactic Empire. The process can be smooth if you cooperate fully with our requirements. Tai-Jin nodded slowly, then spoke in a quiet voice that somehow filled the entire room. "We know about Kepler 442b, the mining colony you established there after removing the native population. We also know about Proxima Centauri C, where you strip-mined 3 continents before the locals stopped resisting." Boram felt her confident smile freeze on her face. Those operations were classified at the highest levels of Imperial Command. Information about them was restricted to only a handful of senior officers. How could this backwater planet possibly know such details? "Your expansion follows very predictable patterns," said Major So-Young, a younger woman who had been sitting quietly in the corner. She stood and walked to the table, sliding a small data device across its surface toward Boram. "Resource extraction, population control, strategic positioning. We've been studying your methods for quite some time." Boram picked up the datapad with trembling fingers. As she scrolled through its contents, her face grew pale. The device contained detailed information about Imperial fleet compositions, showing exactly how many ships were stationed in each sector. It had supply route maps that even some Imperial admirals didn't possess. Most shocking of all, it contained tactical manuals that outlined every strategy the Empire used when conquering new worlds. "This is impossible," Boram whispered, staring at page after page of classified Imperial intelligence. "How do you have access to this information?" General Taijin leaned forward slightly, his calm expression never changing. "Captain, we've been listening to your communications for over 50 years. We've watched your ships move through space, tracked your supply convoys, and studied every battle you fought. While you saw us as a primitive world, not worth your attention, we saw you as a threat that needed to be understood." The room felt suddenly cold to Boram. She realized with growing horror that Earth hadn't been caught off guard by the Imperial fleet's arrival. They had been expecting it, preparing for it. And somehow they knew everything about the Empire's capabilities, while remaining completely invisible to Imperial intelligence networks. Admiral Jin Woo stood behind his tactical officer's chair, watching the holographic display that showed 12 small probe ships moving toward Earth like hunting wolves. These weren't weapons. They were scouts designed to test a planet's defenses without triggering a full military response. Each probe was packed with sensors, cameras, and communication, equipment that would give the Imperial fleet a complete picture of Earth's capabilities. "Launch sequence complete, Admiral," reported his navigation officer. "All probes are running silent and maintaining formation. Their stealth systems are active." Jin Woo nodded with satisfaction. These particular probes had successfully infiltrated the defenses of over 40 different worlds. They were virtually invisible to most scanning systems and could gather intelligence for weeks without being detected. Against a primitive planet like Earth, they should be able to map every defensive installation and military base within hours. "These humans won't even know we're there until our probes are flying through their atmosphere," Jin Woo muttered to himself, adjusting his uniform with pride. "Their technology is so basic they probably still use radar and visual tracking, Lieutenant." Mi Kyung sat at her monitoring station, keeping track of all 12 probe signals. Each probe transmitted a steady stream of data back to the flagship, showing its location, sensor readings, and operational status. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded exactly as planned. Then something impossible happened. "Sir," Mi Kyung called out, her voice filled with confusion. "Probe 7 just vanished from our tracking system." Jin Woo frowned and walked over to her station. "Vanished? You mean it was destroyed by their defenses?" Mi Kyung shook her head, staring at her instruments in disbelief. "No, sir, that's not it. The probe is still functional and transmitting, but it's no longer in our solar system. According to its navigation beacon, Probe 7 is currently located in the Andromeda Galaxy, approximately 2.5 million light-years from here." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet humming of electronic equipment. Every officer stopped what they were doing and stared at Mi Kyung's station. Moving an object instantly across such an enormous distance required technology that was theoretically impossible, even for the advanced Galactic Empire. "That has to be a malfunction in the probe systems," Jin Woo said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Run a diagnostic check immediately." Before Mi Kyung could respond, her console lit up with more alerts. Sir, we just lost probes 3, 9, and 11. Probe 3 is now broadcasting from somewhere near the galactic core. Probe 9 appears to be floating in empty space between galaxies. And Probe 11... She paused, checking her readings twice to make sure they were correct. Probe 11 is orbiting a black hole in a completely different sector of space. Colonel Dong-hyun, Jin-Woo's senior tactical advisor, rushed to the main display screen. His fingers moved rapidly across the control interface, calling up every piece of data they had collected about Earth's technology level. "This makes no sense whatsoever," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "Our intelligence reports show that humans only achieved faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. They should barely be able to reach their own neighboring star systems." The final probe in their squadron suddenly disappeared from the tracking system, its signal immediately reappearing from a location so distant that the communication delay made real-time monitoring impossible. The probe's automated distress beacon began broadcasting continuously, but its cries for help would take thousands of years to reach anyone who might respond. Jin-Woo's knuckles went white as he gripped the armrests of his command chair. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Earth had just demonstrated the ability to instantly relocate objects across impossible distances with pinpoint accuracy, all while showing no obvious signs of the massive energy expenditure such technology should require. "How are they doing this?" he whispered, staring at the tactical display that now showed empty space where his probe squadron had been moments before. Intelligence Officer Yunji walked into the Imperial War Council chamber, carrying a thick folder of classified documents and looking like she hadn't slept in days. The massive holographic projector in the center of the room hummed to life as she activated her presentation. Around the circular table sat the Empire's most senior military commanders, each one eager to understand how a single primitive planet had made their advanced probe ships disappear across the galaxy. General Wu Jin, a veteran of over 100 planetary conquests, leaned forward in his chair as colorful charts and graphs filled the air above the table. "Officer Unji, please explain to us exactly what we're dealing with on Earth. Our current intelligence reports are clearly incomplete." Unji took a deep breath and began her briefing. "Generals, after studying thousands of hours of intercepted human communications and analyzing their historical records, I've discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about warfare. Humans don't fight wars the same way every other species in the galaxy fights wars." She gestured to a timeline, showing major human conflicts throughout their history. "Look at this pattern. In every single war, humans have fought among themselves. They don't focus on conquering territory or capturing enemy resources. Instead, they focus on making the war itself so costly and difficult for their enemies that continuing to fight becomes impossible." Admiral Seung-hoon studied the data flowing across his personal screen. "Their military budget allocations are completely backwards from what we'd expect. They spend almost nothing on invasion fleets or occupation armies. Everything goes toward defensive systems and technologies that make attacking them extremely difficult." The holographic display shifted to show Earth's current military infrastructure. Unlike other planets the Empire had conquered, Earth had no massive space fleets patrolling distant sectors or military bases on conquered worlds. Instead, they had built layer after layer of defensive systems around their home planet and throughout their solar system. "This is what makes them so dangerous," Colonel Hyun-soo said, pointing to the defensive installations. "They've spent decades perfecting the art of making any conflict with them completely unwinnable for the aggressor. They don't need to defeat us in battle. They just need to make fighting them cost more than we're willing to pay." Commander Ji-won highlighted specific installations on Earth's moon and outer planets. "Look at their positioning. Every defensive system is designed not to project power outward, but to protect what they already have. They're not trying to build an empire or conquer neighboring systems. They just want everyone else to leave them alone." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had succeeded because they fought enemies who wanted the same things they wanted: territory, resources, power over other worlds. But Earth represented something completely different. A civilization that had no interest in galactic politics or expansion, but had become so skilled at defensive warfare that attacking them was essentially impossible. General Wu Jin rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. So we're not facing an enemy that wants to defeat us and take our territory. We're facing an enemy that just wants us to go away and stop bothering them. Exactly, Yunji confirmed, and they've become so good at making problems go away that they can relocate our most advanced scout ships to other galaxies without even appearing to use any significant energy. Every time we escalate our efforts against them, they respond by making our escalation completely ineffective, rather than fighting back with equal force. The War Council members looked at each other with growing unease. They had spent their entire careers learning how to defeat enemies who fought for conquest and glory. None of them had any experience dealing with an opponent whose only military goal was to be left alone. Fleet Admiral Jae Sung stood on the command bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the largest Imperial battle fleet assembled in over 50 years. 200 of the Empire's most advanced warships moved in perfect formation through the darkness of space, their weapons charged and ready for combat. This was the kind of overwhelming force that had brought entire star systems to their knees without firing a single shot. Captain Inho, signal all ships to assume full assault formation, Jae Sung commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge communication system. I want every weapon system online and every shield generator at maximum power. Today, we show these humans what happens when a primitive world defies the Galactic Empire. The massive fleet spread out across several thousand kilometers of space, creating an intimidating wall of military might that blocked out the stars behind them. Each ship bristled with energy cannons, missile launchers, and defensive systems that could reduce a planet's surface to molten rock within hours. Jae Sung had used smaller fleets than this to conquer entire civilizations. All ships report ready for combat operations, Captain Inho announced. Weapon systems are locked onto strategic targets across Earth's surface. We can begin bombardment on your command, Admiral. Jae Sung nodded with satisfaction and opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. This is Admiral Jae Sung to all ships. At exactly 0800 hours ship time, we will commence our attack. Show no mercy and leave no doubt about Imperial power. The attack began precisely on schedule. 200 Imperial warships opened fire simultaneously, sending thousands of energy beams and explosive projectiles toward their targets on Earth. It should have been the beginning of a devastating assault that would end Earth's resistance. Within minutes, instead, chaos erupted across the entire Imperial fleet. Admiral, Lieutenant Yejin screamed from her tactical station, her voice filled with panic. Our targeting systems have malfunctioned. The weapons are firing on our own ships instead of the planet. Jae Sung spun around to see the tactical display showing dozens of Imperial vessels accidentally shooting at each other. Ships that should have been targeting Earth's cities were instead sending their weapons fire directly into the hulls of nearby friendly vessels. The carefully coordinated attack had turned into a confused mess of friendly fire incidents. Navigation Officer Min Ho's voice cracked with stress as he delivered even worse news. Sir, we have a massive problem with our propulsion systems. Gravity. Wells are forming around our ships. We're being pulled into localized space distortions that shouldn't exist. The main viewing screen showed the impossible sight of Imperial warships being dragged through space by invisible forces, their engines running at full power but unable to break free from mysterious gravitational fields that seemed to appear and disappear at random. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves pulled back toward Earth, while others spun helplessly in circles as space itself seemed to bend around them. But the most humiliating disaster was yet to come. Communications specialist Da-Un looked up from her station with a face red with embarrassment. Admiral, our secure communication channels have been completely hijacked. Someone is broadcasting private messages between officers across all Imperial frequencies. The bridge speakers suddenly crackled to life with the voice of Captain Inho reading a love letter he had written to his wife back on the Imperial homeworld. This was followed by Lieutenant Yejin's personal diary entries about her fear of space spiders, and then came the most embarrassing broadcast of all, Admiral Jae Sung's own voice reciting terrible poetry he had written about his beloved pet space cat, Whiskers. Every ship in the fleet could hear their commander's heartfelt verses about his cat's beautiful orange fur, like the sunset on Proxima Prime, and tiny paws that dance across my lonely heart. The entire Imperial military operation had been turned into a public humiliation that would be remembered for generations. Not a single Imperial ship had been destroyed or even seriously damaged, but the entire fleet found itself completely powerless to continue their attack. Earth had neutralized 200 warships without firing a shot, turning the galaxy's most feared military force into a floating comedy show. Emperor Gitai stepped through the gleaming corridors of the super-dreadnought Imperial Will, his golden robes flowing behind him as he made his way to the command bridge. This massive warship was the pride of the Imperial fleet, larger than most space stations and equipped with weapons that could crack a planet in half. The Emperor had never personally commanded a military operation before, but Earth's continued. Resistance had become a matter of personal honor that demanded his direct attention. The bridge buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of officers and technicians prepared for what would surely be the final confrontation with the rebellious human world. General Myung-hee, the Empire's most brilliant military strategist, stood at the tactical station reviewing attack plans that had taken weeks to develop. Admiral Chang-ho, known throughout the galaxy as the Emperor's personal enforcer, supervised the weapon systems with cold efficiency. "Your Majesty," General Myung-hee said as the Emperor approached the command platform, "our intelligence suggests that Earth's defensive capabilities are somehow based on advanced technology we don't yet understand. Perhaps we should consider opening diplomatic negotiations before—" "Enough," Emperor Gitai interrupted, raising his hand to silence the general. "I have traveled across half the galaxy to personally witness the end of this embarrassment. No primitive world will be allowed to defy Imperial authority, regardless of whatever tricks they may have learned." The Emperor walked to the main viewing screen and stared at Earth's blue surface, so peaceful and innocent-looking from this distance. It was hard to believe that such a small world could cause so much trouble for his vast empire. But today, all of that would end. "Admiral Chang-ho," the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority, "I want you to destroy their moon. Not damage it, not scar it, completely destroy it. Let the humans watch their satellite turn to dust and understand the price of resistance." Chang-ho bowed deeply and moved to the weapons control station. The Imperial Will's planet-killer weapons began charging with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. Energy readings climbed steadily as the massive guns prepared to unleash enough destructive force to shatter a small moon into billions of pieces. "Weapons are fully charged and locked onto target," Chang-ho reported. "We can fire on your command, Your Majesty." Emperor Gitai nodded with satisfaction and opened his mouth to give the final order. Then Lieutenant Eugene voice cut through the bridge like a knife, filled with absolute terror. "Your Majesty, emergency transmission from the Imperial homeworld. Our star has moved." Every conversation on the bridge stopped instantly. Officers froze at their stations, staring at Eugene as if she had announced the end of the universe itself. Moving a star was impossible. It required more energy than most civilizations could generate in 1,000 years. The main viewing screen switched to real-time feeds from the Imperial homeworld, showing scenes of complete chaos. The sun that had warmed their planet for millions of years had somehow shifted its position by several million kilometers, throwing the entire solar system into disorder. Cities that had enjoyed tropical climates for centuries were now plunging into freezing darkness as their sun appeared to move across the sky in the wrong direction. News reporters on the Imperial homeworld were broadcasting frantically about massive climate disruption. Entire continents were experiencing sudden temperature drops of 50 degrees or more. Ocean currents were changing direction, causing massive storms and tidal waves. Agricultural regions were facing crop failures as their carefully calculated growing seasons were thrown into complete chaos. General Myung-hee's face went completely white as she stared at the destruction unfolding on their home planet. "They can reach anywhere in the galaxy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Distance doesn't matter to them. They can affect our homeworld instantly, from thousands of light years away." For hours, the Emperor and his senior staff watched helplessly. as their civilization's capital world struggled to adapt to its relocated sun. Then, as suddenly as it had moved, the star returned to its original position. The climate disruption began to reverse itself, and the chaos slowly subsided. A simple message arrived from Earth shortly afterward, transmitted on standard diplomatic frequencies. "We prefer negotiation to demonstration. The choice remains yours." Strategic analyst Hyorin walked into the emergency Imperial Council chamber, carrying a stack of data tablets and wearing the exhausted expression of someone who had been working without sleep for days. The ornate meeting room, usually reserved for ceremonial occasions, had been hastily converted into a crisis management center. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the faces of the Empire's most senior officials as they gathered to hear what many suspected would be the worst intelligence briefing in Imperial history. Defense Minister Sang Wook sat at the head of the massive conference table, uniform wrinkled and his usually perfect appearance showing signs of stress. Around him sat the Empire's top military commanders, intelligence officers and regional governors, all waiting to understand how their seemingly unstoppable galactic empire had suddenly found itself unable to expand beyond its current borders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hyorin began, activating the room's holographic display system, "what I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how we understand our current military situation. Earth's resistance to our conquest isn't just about defending their own planet. They've been secretly interfering with Imperial operations across the entire galaxy for decades." She gestured to a star map showing recent Imperial military campaigns, with red markers indicating failed operations and yellow markers showing unexplained setbacks. "Let's start with the rebellion on Tau Ceti 3 months ago. Our intelligence reports claimed it was a spontaneous uprising by the local population against Imperial rule. That was completely wrong." The holographic display zoomed in on the Tau Ceti system, showing detailed analysis of the rebel forces' equipment and tactics. Earth secretly provided the rebels with advanced defensive shield technology that made our standard weapons completely ineffective. The same shield generators that protect Earth's orbital stations were somehow miniaturized and distributed to rebel forces across multiple planets. Intelligence Chief Kang Dai leaned forward in his chair, his face grim as he added more disturbing information. "The supply route disruptions we've been experiencing in the Vega sector weren't caused by space pirates or navigational errors. Earth has been teaching local populations how to create localized hyperspace anomalies that make our cargo ships appear in completely random locations." The room buzzed with shocked conversations as the implications became clear. Imperial supply convoys had been arriving at their destinations weeks late or not at all, forcing military operations to be delayed or cancelled due to lack of resources. What had seemed like a series of unfortunate accidents was actually a coordinated campaign of sabotage. Colonel Seok Jin stood up and pointed to a complex chart showing Imperial military operations over the past 5 years. "I've been running pattern recognition analysis on all our recent setbacks, and the results are terrifying. 27 separate Imperial operations have failed or been significantly delayed due to what we now know was human assistance to local resistance movements." The chart showed a web of connections linking Earth to dozens of different worlds. Across Imperial territory, mining operations that had faced unexpected equipment failures, occupation forces that had encountered mysteriously well-organized resistance, and diplomatic missions that had been disrupted by perfectly timed local uprisings. "They're not fighting us directly," Seokjin continued, his voice filled with grudging admiration. "Instead, they're teaching everyone else how to resist our expansion. Every world we try to conquer now has access to defensive technologies and tactical knowledge that makes conquest extremely difficult and expensive." Governor Na Young, who administered the outer territories where most Imperial expansion took place, spoke up with the frustrated voice of someone who had seen her job become impossible. "Our expansion has effectively stopped completely. Every new world we approach already has Earth's defensive technologies installed and operational before we even arrive. It's as if they know exactly where we're planning to expand next." She activated her own data display, showing Imperial expansion rates over the past decade. Look at this graph. Our rate of territorial acquisition has dropped by over 80% in just the past 2 years. We're not losing territory, but we can't gain any new territory either. The Empire has essentially been frozen at its current size. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the full scope of what Earth had accomplished. While the Imperial military had been focused on direct confrontation, humans had been quietly building a galaxy-wide network of mutual defense that made traditional conquest impossible. They had turned the Empire's greatest strength, its size and reach, into a weakness by giving every potential target the tools they needed to resist Imperial expansion. Defense Minister Sang Wook rubbed his temples and spoke in a tired voice. So our greatest enemy isn't trying to defeat us in battle. They're making us irrelevant by ensuring that no one needs to fear us anymore. Ambassador Subin stepped through the shimmering teleportation beam onto Earth's diplomatic station, her formal imperial robes rustling as she materialized in the clean, well-lit reception area. Behind her, 2 of the Empire's most experienced negotiators, Junho and Hee-young, appeared in similar flashes of light. All 3 wore the confident expressions of diplomats who had successfully negotiated the surrender of countless worlds over their long careers. The space station around them was unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of the crude metal, corridors and flickering lights they expected from a primitive civilization, they found themselves in a facility that rivaled the finest imperial installations. Advanced holographic displays lined the walls, showing real-time data from across the galaxy, while sophisticated environmental systems maintained perfect atmospheric conditions. They were escorted to a conference room where Earth's representatives waited calmly at a polished table. Director Byung-ho, a middle-aged man with graying hair and intelligent eyes, sat with his hands folded peacefully in front of him. Beside him, strategist Yun-soo reviewed data on a tablet, occasionally glancing up at the Imperial delegation with the expression of someone who already knew how this conversation would end. "Welcome to our station," Director Byung-ho said in perfect Imperial standard, rising to offer a respectful bow. "Please have a seat. We have much to discuss." Subin remained standing, choosing to use the intimidation tactics that had worked so well in previous negotiations. "We're not here for pleasantries. Your planet has interfered with legitimate Imperial expansion for the last time. You've built a shadow empire across our territory, turning our own subjects against us." She gestured dramatically, her voice rising with practiced authority. "You've created a network of worlds that answer to Earth instead of the rightful Imperial government. This ends now." Director Byung-ho shook his head with a slight smile, remaining completely calm despite the Imperial diplomat's aggressive tone. "Ambassador, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. We haven't built an empire at all. We've built something much different, a mutual defense network where each world maintains its complete independence." "The distinction is meaningless," Subin replied sharply. "You control them through your advanced technology and military support." Strategist Yun-soo looked up from her tablet and activated the room's holographic display system. "Perhaps a visual explanation would be helpful. Please observe the current galactic situation." The air above the conference table filled with a detailed 3-dimensional map showing hundreds of star systems across their region of the galaxy. Red points of light marked worlds under direct Imperial control, while blue points indicated something entirely different. "Red systems represent your traditional conquests," Yun-soo explained, highlighting the Imperial territories. "Worlds where you maintain military governors, extract resources, and control local governments. Blue systems represent worlds with defensive treaties, completely independent planets that have chosen to share defensive technologies and mutual aid agreements." The pattern was immediately obvious and deeply troubling for the Imperial delegation. The Empire's red territories were almost completely surrounded by a growing network of blue systems, like islands of Imperial control in an ocean of independent worlds that could no longer be conquered. Negotiator Jun-ho leaned forward, studying the holographic display with growing concern. "These blue systems, they're all protected by Earth's defensive technologies. Among other things," Director Byung-ho confirmed, "each world contributes what it can to the network. Some provide manufacturing capabilities, others offer scientific research, and still others share their unique cultural knowledge. Earth happens to specialize in defensive systems and conflict resolution. He, Young, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke up. What exactly do you want from the Empire? Territory? Resources? Tribute payments? Director. Byung-ho's answer was so simple that it took the Imperial delegation several moments to fully understand its implications. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's been our position from the very beginning of this conflict. He stood and walked to the holographic display, gesturing to both the red and blue systems. We want to be left alone, Ambassador, but we also want to live in a galaxy where leaving people alone is actually possible, where small worlds don't have to live in constant fear of being conquered by larger empires. Zubin stared at the galactic map, finally beginning to understand the true scope of what Earth had accomplished. They hadn't built a rival empire to compete with Imperial expansion. Instead, they had made Imperial expansion impossible by giving every potential target the ability to defend itself successfully. You've changed the entire balance of galactic power, she whispered, without conquering a single world. 6 months had passed since the first Imperial fleet had arrived at Earth's doorstep with demands for surrender. Now former Fleet Admiral Sung-min sat in the luxurious conference room of the neutral space station New Harmony, staring at the formal treaty documents spread across the polished table before him. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the ceremonial signing stylus, not from fear, but from the weight of history he was about to make. The Terran Accords represented the most significant shift in galactic politics in over 1,000 years. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had expanded through conquest and intimidation, adding new worlds to their territory through overwhelming military force. Today, that era was officially coming to an end. Ambassador Min Seo sat across from him, her calm demeanor unchanged from their first meeting months ago. She had negotiated these terms with the patience of someone who knew that time was on humanity's side. While Imperial fleets had struggled with equipment malfunctions and embarrassing communication breakdowns, Earth's diplomatic team had worked steadily to build consensus among the galaxy's independent worlds. Admiral Sung-min, Min Seo said formally, "Are you prepared to sign on behalf of the Galactic Empire?" Sung-min nodded and placed his signature on the final page of the treaty. The terms were surprisingly simple for such a momentous document. The Empire would immediately cease all expansion through military conquest and would join the newly formed Galactic Defensive Alliance as an equal member, not as its leader. In return, Earth would share its advanced defensive technologies with all member worlds and guarantee that no planet in the Alliance would face extinction-level threats. "It's done," Sung-min said quietly, setting down the stylus and looking up at the human ambassador. "The Empire officially renounces conquest as a method of expansion." Min Seo offered him a respectful bow, acknowledging the significance of his decision. "Thank you, Admiral. Your signature today ensures that future generations across the galaxy will grow up in a universe where might no longer makes right." Commander Wonsik, who had been reassigned from military operations to serve as the Empire's liaison with the Defensive Alliance, stood at the station's massive viewing window watching the stars. In the distance, Earth's blue surface was visible, looking peaceful and innocent, despite the incredible defensive capabilities hidden beneath its atmosphere. "Ambassador," Wonsik said, pointing toward Earth, "something interesting is happening to your planet's defense systems." Min Seo joined him at the window and smiled as she saw what he was observing. Across Earth's orbital space, the massive defense platforms that had protected the planet for decades were slowly powering down. Energy shields that had been maintained at full strength for years were flickering off one by one. Weapon systems that could relocate Imperial fleets across the galaxy were going into standby mode. "Are they shutting down their weapons?" Wonsik observed with surprise. "I thought Earth would maintain its defenses even after the treaty was signed." Min Seo's smile widened as she watched her homeworld's defensive grid systematically deactivate. "We don't need them anymore, Commander. The galaxy has finally learned that there are better ways to solve problems than through violence and intimidation." Throughout the galaxy, life continued much as it had before, but with one crucial difference: former Imperial worlds no longer lived under the constant threat of rebellion being crushed by overwhelming military force. Independent systems no longer feared that their resources would be stripped away by conquering fleets. Small civilizations could develop at their own pace without worrying about being absorbed into larger empires. The invisible network of mutual defense treaties and shared technologies had created something unprecedented in galactic history. Stable peace that didn't depend on any single empire's military dominance. Earth had achieved its original goal of being left alone, but they had accomplished it by ensuring that alone now meant living in a universe where bullies and conquerors simply couldn't operate successfully. As the last defense platform powered down, Minseo reflected on humanity's unique approach to the problem of galactic warfare. The defense grid wasn't shutting down because the threat had been eliminated. It was shutting down because it was no longer necessary. Peace, it turned out, was just another problem that humans had learned to solve.